Can begin.
Hi, a very good morning to each and every one of you, and greetings from Beatrice. I, Rosa Quadris, on behalf of Beatrice, welcome you all to this webinar session. I would like to introduce today our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sunaina Hameed. Dr. Sunaina is an MBBS MD with over 8 years of experience in clinical dermatology and aesthetic dermatology. She is the founder, medical director, and consultant dermatologist at Skin Health Advanced Dermatology Center, Bangalore, since 2016. Dr. Sunena is also the medical director for education for the American Board of Laser Surgery since 2014. She has received the certification of the diplomate from the American Board of Laser Surgery, and she is the first and only Indian dermatologist to be awarded the diplomate by the prestigious ABLS, which is the highest level of qualification in the world for the use of aesthetic lasers. And the list goes on. Today, Dr. Sunena would be throwing some light on photoprotection beyond UV light and the role of blue light. So, Dr. Sunaina, I hand over the session to you. A very warm welcome. And I now hand over the session to you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you, everyone who's joined in. So, I'm Dr. Sunaina Hameed. I am a Bangalore based consultant dermatologist, and yeah, actually, I have over 13 years of experience post MD. And so, today I'm joining in on behalf of Viatris and Mylan Pharmaceuticals, and I'll be speaking on photoprotection beyond UV light and the role that is played by blue light and visible light on skin and photodermatosis. So I'll be moving on to my presentation now. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to all of you. So, like I was saying, photo protection that goes beyond just the role of UV light or ultraviolet light, and how does blue light and visible light play in skin damage and photo damage. So, UV light composes only a very small region of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, and it is divided into three subdivisions, as we all know: the UVC, UVB, and UVA radiation. So, ozone in the Earth's atmosphere absorbs 100% of the UVC radiation, approximately 90% of UVB, and virtually none of the UVA radiation. Of the two types of UV light that does manage to reach the Earth's surface, 90 to 99% of ultraviolet A radiation reaches the Earth's surface, but only 1 to 10% of UVB reaches the Earth's surface. Ultraviolet A is the long wavelength. It is lower in energy, but because of the long wavelength, it can penetrate right up to the dermis. But UVB is a short wavelength, high in energy, but it penetrates only up to the epidermal level. Ultraviolet A was once considered harmless, but now we know that it is known as the sun's silent killer. But UVB we always knew is carcinogenic. It's 1,000 times more effective than UVA in causing sunburns. UVA is responsible for photoaging and immediate and persistent pigment darkening, whereas UVB causes tanning, sunburns, wrinkling, photoaging, and skin cancer. Ultraviolet A can pass through glass and clouds as well. Ultraviolet B cannot do it, but up to 80% of ultraviolet B is reflected back from snow and sand and water and concrete. This is known as the surface albedo. So, because of this, the intensity of UVA remains the same throughout the year, whereas the intensity of UVB will vary depending on the season or the time of the day or the time of the year. So, not all ultraviolet radiation is bad for us. We need UV light for vitamin D synthesis. It is used for the treatment of multiple diseases, skin diseases. It is used for the treatment of rickets. It is used for in the treatment of neonatal jaundice. It has germicidal properties. It has psychological benefits as well. But excessive ultraviolet radiation or prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation will have damaging effects. Other than sunburns and photodermatosis, photoaging, and skin cancers, it can also cause immunosuppression. It can cause photoanalysis. It can cause cataract formation as well. So, visible light is the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation that is seen by the human eye, consisting of wavelength between 400 to 700 nanometer. The primary natural source of visible light is sunlight, which is composed of 39 to 44% visible light when it reaches the Earth's surface. Artificial sources of visible light include light bulbs, computers, televisions, and cell phones, lasers, and other therapeutic devices, among others. Blue light inhibits the shortest wavelength of visible light. So, with visible light, to simplify it in school, they taught us it's a VIBGYOR. So, the VIB is the blue light spectrum, which is approximately 450 to 495 nanometer and is closer to the UVR wavelength. Blue light is derived from sunlight, but also from electronic devices such as smartphones, tablets, and computers. Blue light enters deep into the skin, similar to ultraviolet A radiation, and it can cause deleterious effects to all the skin layers by generating reactive oxygen species and weakening the epidermal barrier, thereby damaging the extracellular matrix and accelerating the aging. So, visible light was shown to cause various skin changes like erythema, pigmentation. In fact, blue light was found to be 25% more efficient in producing pigmentation compared to UV light, especially in the darkest Fitzpatrick skin types. It can also cause thermal damage and reactive oxygen species or free radical formation and indirect DNA damage through this ROS formation. So, oxidative stress caused by the sun's UVA and UVB rays are the primary cause of premature skin aging and skin pigmentation issues. But recent studies have shown that high energy visible light, that is the light we see all around us, can also cause oxidative stress to skin and can also contribute to pigmentation. Skin damage caused by visible light includes melasma, post inflammatory pigmentation, ephilids, and solar elastosis. But besides just these cosmetic changes of pigmentation and aging, visible light is also responsible for many other photosensitive skin diseases, like, for instance, solar urticaria, chronic actinic dermatitis, photodrug reaction. Porphyria, for instance, is almost entirely caused by visible light. Granted, porphyria is not very common in Indian skin types, but even so. So, sun protection is the most significant step that you can take in helping in preventing pigmentation and these photodermatosis. And using a broad spectrum sunscreen every day is the first step towards that. When the first hole was found in the ozone layer above Australia, in Australia, the government came up and the health authorities came up with a very popular slogan in public known as the slip, slop, and slap. And over the years, it was then further extended into the slip, slop, slap, seek, and slide. So these are referring to the sun protection measures one can take to protect oneself from the deleterious effect of UV radiation. So what it is referring to is to slip on a shirt, slop on some sunscreen, slap on a hat, seek the shade, and slide on a pair of sunglasses. So sunscreens are topical preparations containing inorganic and organic substances that can either reflect and scatter or absorb ultraviolet radiation in the UVB and UVA wavelength range. They are classified as organic, or formerly known as chemical sunscreens, or inorganic, which are formerly known as physical sunscreens. Broad spectrum sunscreens are generally a combination of sunscreen products that are able to absorb both UVB and UVA radiation. Organic filters include a variety of aromatic compounds that absorb UV radiation and are able to convert it to a negligible amount of heat. Whereas inorganic filters, they don't absorb it. These are mineral compounds such as zinc oxide and titanium dioxide that are believed to reflect and scatter UV light over a wide range of wavelengths. Inorganic sunscreens are stable, and in contrast to organic filters, they have a lower irritation and sensitization potential. So these are the list of FDA approved sunscreen filters. In the US, around 17 UV filters have been approved for use by the US FDA regulations. In India, around 27 UV filters have been approved for use. So, like I said, they have been broadly categorized into the chemical absorbers and the physical filters. The physical filters, the most famous ones are, of course, the titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. But there are other ones, of course. There is iron oxide is there. There is calamine. There is ictamol. There's kaolin, to name a few. And chemical absorbers are broadly classified into the UVA filters, the UVB filters, and then there's a hybrid ones which combine both. So the UVA filters are usually benzophenone and avobenzone and meroxyl, And the UVB filters are generally PABAs and salicylates and cinemates. So, sun protection factor or the SPF was first developed by an Austrian called Franz Grieter in 1962. So, determination of the SPF is based on the main factor here is we are looking at MED or the minimal erythema dose. So, it is a minimal erythema dose of skin protected by sunscreen divided by skin not protected by sunscreen. So, SPF is mostly a determinant of protection from UVB radiation. It doesn't really give us an idea of how much this sunscreen can protect us against UVA radiation. So, for instance, if an SPF of 8, it will block 88% of UVB radiation. SPF 15 will block 93%. SPF 30 will block 97%. And some of the newer sunscreens of SPF 50, 60 and above will block about 99 to 100% of the UV radiation. So if you see between an SPF 30 and an SPF 50, there's only a 2% increased protection of how much of the UVB radiation it can block. So for the darker Fitzpatrick skin type, like the Indian skin type, there may not be much more benefit of using a sunscreen of with SPF more than 50, like using an SPF 70 or an SPF 100. But what about the UVA efficacy of a sunscreen? How do we calculate that? So the JCIA has adopted the in vivo PPD method. Here, the criteria is not the MED or the minimum erythema dose. We use the PPD method, that is a persistent pigment darkening, as an official method of assessing the UVA efficacy. So later, this method was adopted by Korea and China and the European Commission, where the UVAPF of a sunscreen is the minimum PPD dose on sunscreen protected skin divided by minimum PPD dose on unprotected skin. So for PPD is 2 to 4, the sunscreen has a protection of PA 1 plus, where if the PPD is more than 16, the sunscreen will have a protection of PA 4 plus. So in vivo methods are now mostly, getting a bit outdated, and for ethical reasons, people are mostly going towards the in vitro method. So that's a booth star rating is based on the in vitro method of calculation of the UVA PF of a sunscreen, where the UVA transmission through the sunscreen is applied to a PMMA substrate and then it is calculated. So the SPF to the UVA PF ratio of less than or equal to 3 is a minimum requirement of UVA efficacy of a sunscreen in Europe, Australia, Canada, and South America. So to keep it simple, the UVA protection of a sunscreen must be at least 1/3 of the SPF, which is the UVB protection of the sunscreen. Another method is calculation of the critical wavelength. So critical wavelength, there are many descriptions that have been mentioned in the literature, but to make it simple, critical wavelength is a wavelength at which the sunscreen allows only 10% of the rays to penetrate. So a sunscreen with critical wavelength of over 370 nanometers is FDA recommended for superior UVA protection. So basically this critical wavelength is what truly defines the true broad spectrum protection of a sunscreen. And this is independent of the product application thickness. So all individuals, regardless of the skin phototype, are subject to the potential adverse effects of UV radiation. So irrespective of your Fitzpatrick skin type, everybody will benefit from sunscreen use. So what about the safety of sunscreens? Sunscreens generally have an excellent safety profile, and there is no evidence of systemic adverse effects related to percutaneous absorption. But for those concerned about systemic absorption of organic sunscreens, especially in children with thinner skin, sunscreens that contain inorganic constituents like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, that is a physical sunscreens, can be recommended. So with side effects of sunscreens, sometimes organic sunscreens may rarely induce allergic and irritant contact dermatitis, especially PABA and oxybenzone are more sensitizing. Sometimes they can induce phototoxic and photoallergic reactions, contact urticaria. Oxybenzone and benzophenone were found to be estrogenic. The non-micronized titanium dioxide and zinc oxide leave a white cast. So especially in the darker skin tones, these were not found to be very cosmetically elegant. So consumer acceptance was a little low. On the other hand, the micronized titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, they don't have this white cast problem. But then it was reducing the UVA protection of these ingredients. There are studies that found that using sunscreen on large parts of the body over a prolonged period of time can lead to vitamin D deficiencies as well. PABA was found to be carcinogenic in animal studies. So between this and the irritant dermatitis, potential of PABA, the use of PABA has come down in sunscreens. And octinoxate and oxybenzone are deleterious to coral life and marine life. So certain countries like Hawaii have banned the use of these sunscreen ingredients. So, what is the proper use of sunscreens? Sunscreens must be applied liberally, repeatedly, and to all the sun exposed parts of the skin to provide effective protection. So, there are simple practical rules, such as the teaspoon rule. They may be used to determine the adequate amount of sunscreen to apply to certain body areas. So, this is for an adult body, and it involves the application of approximately 1 teaspoon of sunscreen to the face and neck, 2 teaspoons for the front and back torso, 1 teaspoon to each upper extremity, and 2 teaspoons to each lower extremity. Sunscreen should be applied 15 to 30 minutes before sun exposure to allow the formation of a protective film on the skin, and reapplied every 2 hours. So, what are the criteria of an ideal sunscreen? So, it should have an adequate SPF depending on your Fitzpatrick skin type, broad spectrum coverage. So, like we said, a critical wavelength of at least 370 nanometer, water resistant or water sweat resistant. So, there's no such thing as a waterproof sunscreen. That term is misleading. Cosmetic appeal of the sunscreen products to make it acceptable to the consumer, especially its non-comedogenicity. Stable and safe ingredients. The ingredients of the sunscreen should be non-toxic, non-irritant, and chemically inert. It should be long-lasting. Ideally, this reapplying every 3-4 hours in real time, hardly anybody will actually be able to do it. And in terms of the UVA protection, a rating of PA3 plus or PA4 plus, boot star rating of 4 star or 5 star. These would be the criteria of an ideal sunscreen. What are the unmet needs of sunscreens today? So, currently available chemicals UV filters are not sufficient to protect the skin from the effects of visible light and infrared radiation. Although non-micronized form of zinc oxide or titanium dioxide would physically block visible light transmission, the chalky white appearance of these agents make them aesthetically not acceptable to users. On the other hand, like I was saying, micronized zinc oxide and titanium dioxide does not leave a white cast, but this affects the UVA protection offered by these filters. So, iron oxide, it was found that if you add iron oxide in a content of more than 3.2%, along with added antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, ferulic acid, and niacinamide, etc., then we can provide coverage against visible light, blue light in particular. So, visible light can affect the dermis and the epidermis. The penetration is fairly deep and it can cause erythema, pigmentation, thermal damage, and ROS formation. So active photoprotection is needed. Active photoprotection meaning covering not just ultraviolet but damage against infrared and visible light as well. Not just for from the tanning perspective or the sunburn perspective, but also to protect against the free radical formation, which will eventually lead to DNA damage. So as of now, we don't have studies that have actually proven whether even visible light can cause skin cancer. It is in vivo. We are not very sure if that's possible, but there are studies that indicate that it is leading to free radical formation, which will lead to DNA damage. So yes, it is possible. So coming to the new sunscreen from Beatrice, the Suntris SPF 50. Here the key UV filters are Uvinal MC80, homosalate, tinosorb M, and titanium dioxide, with the key functional ingredients being OTC10 and Phytospherix. So OTC10, it is a 10% dilution of an optimized photoprotective compound. It's basically an antioxidant and it has electrophilic scavenging properties. It has demonstrated its ability to detoxify any skin layer, hence limited in UV, IR, and blue light induced cutaneous damage. So, because of its broad antioxidant activity spectrum, it has been found to be a good free radical scavenger. So, in vitro studies have shown that it can mop up reactive nitrogen species, reactive oxygen species, reactive carbonyl species as well. So, its safety has been tested. It's an antioxidant, it's an osmoregulator. It has been shown that it may protect against infrared induced damage as well. In vitro studies have shown that basically we do not have any sunscreen filter that can effectively and completely block against infrared radiation. What we can do is by adding antioxidants to the existing UV filters, it can provide an additional benefit or protection against infrared radiation, and this is what OTZ has been found to offer. This can also protect against blue light and visible ray induced damage. OTC is capable of negating the effect of blue light by scavenging free radicals and thus preventing MMP1 overexpression and collagen degradation. It is perfectly tolerated. Tolerance and toxicity studies were performed using both in vitro and in vivo methods. The other ingredient in the sunscreen is Phytospherix. This is a multifunctional glycogen. So, Phytospherix is a native form of glycogen obtained through a patented green water based process. It's a highly branched polysaccharide with a unique spherical dendrimetric structure. Due to its native bioidentical structure, Phytospherix has the same effect as glycogen. So, what's glycogen in the skin? So, we know of glycogen in the liver. So, glycogen is basically stored cellular energy. In our skin, glycogen is also produced in stressful conditions, like when we are exposed to excessive UV exposure. So, it improves the skin's cell energy level as an emergency response. The ability of our cells to produce energy decreases over time. So, adding glycogen topically provides an efficient energy source to our cells for a multifunctional effect on the overall skin appearance. So, phytospherins increases the metabolic activity of the fibroblasts. So, how does that help? At the surface level, it provides a cushioning effect. So, it has a smoothing effect on the skin. It has excellent water absorption and retention properties. So, it can act as a wonderful moisturizer. And of course, it acts as a quick energy source. So, it's a cellular energy booster. So this was found to be a powerful anti-aging ingredient. Phytospherins increases cellular metabolism and promotes collagen and hyaluronic acid production in skin cells. So studies showed, especially done around the forehead lines and crow's feet, that it was able to reduce wrinkle depth and wrinkle area. These were studies performed in women over a period of 6 weeks. Phytospherins is also good moisturizer because it can tightly hold on to water for long periods of time and boost hydration performance when used on its own or in combination with hyaluronic acid. It can even out skin tone, recover skin luminosity, and enhance the skin tone. So, studies done over a period of about 4 weeks, again on female skin, showed that it reduces skin redness, improves skin radiance, and skin homogeneity. So, to summarize, Phytospherix has anti aging properties. It acts as a cellular energizer to normalize skin cell function, reducing the appearance of wrinkles and discoloration. It is a superb moisturizer. It improves perception of skin feel by softening the surface, providing immediate and long lasting hydration. It can even out the skin tone, so it helps smoothen the skin, visibly improving the texture as well as discoloration. These properties are unique to a truly natural ingredient because it's a natural constituent of our skin. It is perfectly tolerated, therefore, eliminating any adverse response, and it nourishes the skin using a normal metabolic processes. So, remember when we were speaking earlier about the properties of an ideal sunscreen. So, when we speak about the benefits of Suntris SPF 50, it pretty much ticks a lot of those boxes because it is a broad spectrum sunscreen agent. Tinosorb M here is the filter of choice to offer broad spectrum UV protection. It is SPF 50 plus, so it will block about 98% of UVB radiation. So it is PA3 plus, so it offers good UVA protection as well. It is water resistant for up to 8 hours. The OTZ10 limits the blue light and infrared induced cutaneous damage. It contains glycogen, which is a powerful anti aging ingredient. So, moisturizing, sunscreen, anti aging, these are ingredients that go very well together. And they're very natural ingredients to be blended together. And these are all being dermatologically tested and clinically proven. So, to summarize, currently available clinical chemical UV filters are not sufficient generally to protect the skin from the effects of visible light. Active photoprotection is needed against UV, IR, and visible blue light spectrums, and newer products are now available to meet this need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunaina, for, like I said, throwing some light on photo protection and the role of blue light. There are a few questions that have come in. So the first is, now because of the pandemic and wave after wave, many of them are working from home, and that has increased the exposure to devices. What are some of the to dos that everyone can follow, especially the ones who are constantly and now for a longer period of time exposed to devices?
That is one thing that we have also consistently been hearing over a period of time, that patients who were very regular with using the sunscreen over the last 2 years, they have stopped using sunscreen, saying that, "But we were not out in the sun, we were indoors, and so we stopped using it." But on the other hand, everybody's screen time has gone up exponentially, because whether it's phone or laptop, or whether even just helping their kids out with online classes and everything, screen time has actually gone up. And people have not really understood what is visible light. So a simple example that I give people is that there are a lot of studies that have shown that there are people in professions which are typically indoor jobs, like bakers. I'm not talking about home bakers, I'm talking about people who have worked with large ovens and glass blowers. So these are indoor professions, and yet their hands and forearms will show all the damage of typical, sun damage. So this is again the damage that can be done by infrared light and visible light. It is not just heat, it is radiation that comes off from these devices. So sunscreens have to be used. Now again, sunscreens, if it is just a SPF, so that is for the ultraviolet B radiation usually. And that is what people have in mind, that I'm not being exposed out to sun. So we need sunscreens which also have the added antioxidants in them, because correctly speaking, we don't actually have any sunscreen filter that can block against infrared very effectively. It is added antioxidants which give the benefit of it. Second, we need sunscreen that have some amount of physical filters as well, because it's the physical filter that will block against the visible light. So the concept of what is a broad spectrum sunscreen, what are hybrid sunscreens, why they need to have physical as well as chemical filters in it, that education has to come through, and why we recommend sunscreen use through the day, every day.
Right, right. Thank you so much, doctor. Another question on when can these sunscreen be used? What would be the ideal time? So when there is exposure to devices, what would be the ideal time and the frequency of use?
It would start basically 20 minutes before you start your day. So it depends on when you start your day, whether you start working from 8 in the morning, or whether you start your work from 11 in the morning. So 20 minutes before you start your day. And frequency of use will also actually depend on the kind of sunscreen you're using, how long lasting it is. But every 4 hours to every 6 hours. That is how with most sunscreens it would be. Because most working days go on for about 8 hours, and the sunscreen will also last for about 4 to 6 hours. So 4 to 6 hours reapplication is good um, thing. But 2 hours is, I think, we can say that, but in real time, nobody will actually be able to follow that. So we have to strike the right balance between giving an advice which is actually feasible and sustainable.
Right, right. Okay. And another question is that does so we've seen the Fitzpatrick scale, where we determine the skin color. So does that also play a role? So when there's exposure to devices, does the color of skin or content of melanin also depend on the effect that is caused by these devices, the blue light that
Yes,
comes from
it
devices?
does. It does, because all the studies have shown that the visible light, it does more damage to darker Fitzpatrick skin type. So compare
Okay.
the Fitzpatrick 1 to 3 skin, visible light doesn't do that much of a damage unless you're suffering from porphyria. Porphyria is almost completely because of visible light only. UV light doesn't play that much of a role in porphyria, but that's a very rare skin condition. But if you're talking about the role of visible light and the pigmentation it causes, or the erythema and the damage it can cause, it is actually playing more of a role in darker skin tones rather than lighter skin tones. So the role
Okay.
of blue light and its damage is more significant in darker skin tones.
All right. All right.
Whereas the
Also,
skin
does
cancer thing is more in the lighter skin tones.
okay. Okay. Interesting. One
When
last
we're talking
question,
about
doctor.
skin cancer, when we're fearing skin cancer, we are mostly fearing ultraviolet. So for that
Right.
perspective, we're looking for a high SPF. Whereas when we are thinking about visible light, the visible light damage is more with the darker skin types. So this
Mhm.
blue light protection is actually more relevant for our skin type, actually.
Okay. Okay. And last question is that does blue light or visible light have an effect on worsening of acne? If there is already, there is acne, does it have any effect on acne or worsening of acne?
No, most likely it has a protective effect on acne because blue light has actually been used for treatment of acne, rosacea, seborrheic dermatitis. So it doesn't have an effect on worsening of acne, but blue light may play a role in post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation
Okay.
indirectly. So not on acne. In acne, it most likely has a protective role.
Okay. All right. All right. So, those were the questions. That is all. So, I would like to thank you, Dr. Sunaina, for taking us through the entire presentation and also answering the questions that have come in.
Thank you.
And also, thanks to all the viewers who have joined in. And I hope a lot of doubts, a lot of questions that you all had were answered through the presentation and through this question answer session. So, thank you so much, Doctor. It was really nice to have you on this platform and share your knowledge and shed some light on blue light, its effects, and role of sunscreens. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks
Thanks a
for the
lot.
opportunity. Have a nice Sunday, everyone.
You too. Yeah. Bye. Take care.
Bye bye. Good night.